It's an amazing feeling to be here today. And what I'm going to talk to you and take you through is some brief points on how Indians are attracted to Sweden, what can Sweden do to attract the Indians, and what could be some winning strategies. But let me first tell you that I represent Visit Sweden in India. I've also been working with the other Scandinavian countries over the last 5 years promoting tourism to this part of the world. How can Indians be attracted to Sweden? Well, that's easy, because the country has it all. You talk about the Swedish Lapland, you talk about the Sami culture, you talk about the city of Stockholm itself, the nature, everything that the Indians are looking at. The Indians have been looking at and going to Europe for a long, long time. So the Indians are looking for a European experience, but they're looking at also a European experience with a Scandinavian touch. And what they get as a bonus is, I think, the sophistication of Sweden along. So I think there's a lot that the Indians are looking forward from coming into Sweden. And the country, possibly in the future, will have tourists going all across the country. One of the biggest reasons, though, I think, of people coming into Sweden today is Stockholm. And what can I say about this city, the most beautiful city in the world, the most beautiful capital in the world? I said even the Vasa lay here for 333 years to one day be a part of this magnificent city. And that talks a lot about how beautiful the city is. What does Stockholm need to? What does Stockholm offer to the Indians coming, and what has it been attracting a lot? Well, it's a complete destination in itself. The beauty of water. It has 30,000 archipelagos, which is a unique natural wonder that Stockholm's blessed with this nature around. It has the green spaces. In 2010, Stockholm was the first green space, was awarded the first green city in Europe. It's also got the sophistication and being friendly. Normally, it sounds like a contradiction, but you got to experience that only in Sweden to be able to realize how being friendly, being sophisticated, and welcoming goes all along. And that's, I think, the key, because people are very, very forthcoming and helpful, yet hospitable. And it's not the kind of impression that people back in India had to begin with, that the northern part of Europe is even going to be more stiffer than the central Europe. That's not true, actually. The hospitality here is much, much more. The creative and trendy, I think Indians are very, very progressive today. They want to imbibe and look at the West, where the fashion is quite distinct and different. So when you come to Scandinavia and you're in Stockholm, I think the kind of brands that you see here are much more unique and different than the rest of Europe that you've been seeing the international brands. Well, the world-class attractions. We've got one of the world's oldest open-air museums, Skansen. Of course, the Vasa Museum here is one of the most visited in Scandinavia. We've got other tourist attractions for groups like the Sky View, where one can go on top of the globe and actually have the views to the beautiful Stockholm. It has the ABBA Museum, the first cashless museum, but ABBA has been really popular in India as well. It has a zoo at the Skansen, where within the city limits, if visitors wanted to go see elk, could possibly do that. So it has virtually everything, the Swedish flavors. So it's no more just the meatballs and the herrings. It's a lot happening at the cuisine in Sweden. And I think today you see some celebrity chefs. There's Matthias at the Grand Hotel, and there's so many others that are being talked about. And I think in the last decade, the cuisine's completely gone through a revolution here in Stockholm. Also the Swedish fika that I keep talking about all the time, and I think Indians are beginning to know about it. And I've been also talking back in India that the Swedes even have a bulla day here. So you're celebrating having coffee and the bulla, and I think that's something that some of the Indians are catching up on. Well, Sweden closer than we imagine. I think the impression for a lot of people here when I speak to, and I think people think that we came from a really long distance. That's not so true for the Indians, actually. We are very used to traveling. If you actually see that the relationships and bonds between India and US, they are very strong. And that doesn't show that there's been any limitation on the geographic part of it. Also, 500,000 people are today going to UK and France, for example, and they don't find that really far. But also to our surprise, if you already know about it, that Stockholm, getting to Stockholm is actually an hour quicker than going to London. Getting to Stockholm is actually about 45 minutes quicker than going to Paris from India. I'm talking on the indirect flight, which is Emirates. So that's that's what I mean by saying that Sweden closer than we imagine. Well, the time difference is only 3.5 hours. It suits us perfect. We begin our day a little late, about 10 o'clock or 10:30 in some cases. Bombay begins it a little earlier, but rest of India, I think, begins by 10:30. 3.5 difference, and you begin your work early. So I think it perfectly matches. Also, we Indians are running a bit late sometimes, so it perfectly suits us to be having that time advantage with you here in Stockholm. Well, we speak the same language, so I don't have to learn Swedish. You don't have to learn Hindi or one of the 22 languages. But if you still insist and you have the time, then you may learn Chinese, I think. But you don't need to learn our languages to be doing business with India. Well, indeed, it's closer than we imagine. I don't think anyone sitting in India could imagine that Stockholm alone, I think at just one website, I see 130 listed Indian restaurants. Most people in India, the travel partners who are supposed to be the experts, call me and ask me if Sweden has restaurants, Indian restaurants. Well, Sweden alone, Stockholm alone has 100 Indian restaurants. I also say, and I go a step forward by saying a little bit of Sweden in our lives. And that's true. Maybe some of the Indians don't realize that. But we have been exposed to the Swedish brands for a long, long time. Electrolux of Sweden, I think we've experienced and used products for the last 25, 30 years. And I think I must point out Truecaller. Out of the 100 million people Truecaller has today worldwide, approximately 50 million are only in India. That's 10 times the population of Sweden. So the kind of consumption that we have, I don't think a lot of Indians know that Truecaller or Skype is Swedish. But what I mean to say here is, when people find this out, and we should talk about and communicate this, I think you're able to immediately connect and feel familiar about these products that you're using. ABBA, we have the brands Haston selling in India. I often say that you can sleep on the most comfortable beds in the world. You can only lose your sleep over paying the most expensive price for having those most comfortable beds. We also probably, and here on the corner right, you see Bjorn Borg. I didn't mean the brand Bjorn Borg that we consume in India yet, but I meant the tennis player Bjorn Borg. Volvo and vodka brands put together, not for a conscious reason, but I said in India we're not so serious about drinking and driving. And I said, if you are drinking and driving, then you better be driving the safest car in the world. So many of these things actually that we've been consuming in India, and I think we need to talk about that. And the communication is the key, because I don't think a lot of Indians know this, and this is very important for us to communicate. And we need to bridge the communication gap to understand how Sweden needs to attract more Indians. And that can happen. I remember 5 years back when I started working at this part of the world, and I was interacting with some Swedish partners. And one of the Swedish partners was very nervous. She said, I'm going to be having groups from India. I don't know what they eat. I don't know how to deal with the exaggerated service standards that you expect. And I said, that's exaggerated for you. That's a standard service for us. But we need to understand this today and bridge this communication gap. So you need to know a little more about the Indians. The Indians always want more, and more and more. They'll always come back and negotiate and then ask you to better your best deal. But that's the way we are. Nordic cuisine, Italian cuisine, we want it really hot and spicy. We want paprika, or we are happy to do with the Tabasco. I saw Tabasco on tables yesterday to one of the restaurants we went, and I imagine that I don't think Swedish people consume Tabasco in restaurants ever normally, but I think we can be quite excessive with that. We're very expressive. We're very curious, very, very engaging. Now, these sound like simple habits for Indians, but I think if you put one of these habits into practice, and I start working with one of the DMCs or a hotel, and I keep running through my negotiations, and then I have the group confirmation, I go ahead, confirm, get the 25% advance, and I say rest of the payments, and I come back for one last negotiation. It might cause a minor irritant or a major irritant. And do we mean then that more Indians in Sweden is equal to more stress management? And you know why I put this slide here is because a few years back, actually, about a year and a half back, I was here and I asked someone, I was at a hotel and I spoke to a girl at the reception and also somebody who was working at the bar, that you see the numbers of Indians going up? They said, yes. I said, are your troubles going up also? They looked at me and said, yes, how do you know? After the Indian group checks out, we need stress management. And I remember telling them something, since it's more like a cultural event. I quoted them from one of the spiritual gurus that taught me about stress. So when he went to the US a few years back, and it was the key word in the US a few years back, stress management. Everyone was talking about stress management. So this yoga guru said, spiritual guru said, I laughed and I said, why should you manage things like stress? You should manage things that are precious to you. You should manage your family, you should manage your bank accounts, you should manage your business. Well, why do you need to manage stress? You should manage rather the Indians who might cause you the stress, but if you know them, then you know them in a different way and you can bridge that gap. And he also said one more thing, going back to the slide. We are not going to be often able to change the content in our lives. So I don't think Sweden has the resources to change Indian habits, neither do they intend to. But if you change the context, then everything seems to change. And what also you need to know about the Indians, that we are very friendly, polite, and accommodating. It's the way we are used to not having a no at an answer on the outset, but maybe going a little around and say, well, it's not possible, but however, you want to try that. But it's just some of these small habits. We may negotiate, but once we start consuming a holiday, I think our budgets go out of the window. We are always exceeding our budgets by 2 times, and that's most Indians have to tell you that we leave our budgets exactly in the country where we leave our negotiating habits back. We are also talking about Indians who are going to tell the world once they're happy. So they're not going to keep quiet that this Swedish experience has been fantastic. I think they go tell the world about that, and we are very progressive travelers. So what does that mean? Takes us to some winning strategies. In India, what do we need to do? We need to address the travel trade. Today, in spite of the new online data, Indians are going online and checking and doing research, but they still go back to the travel agents. About 80% of them are booking their holidays and vacations through travel agents even today. We need to disseminate this information and bridge this gap of communication that we have and get the consumer to be engaged as well through a PR campaign and tell him more about what Sweden has to offer. And I say the Scandinavian strategy, our advantage. If you see, typically, Indians have been traveling to destinations in groups. The first set of Indians traveled to London, Paris, and Switzerland. They knew London, Paris as cities and Switzerland as a country. They didn't even know which city in Switzerland they were going to. But 3 places worked perfectly well for them. If you see, they traveled to Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore together. They traveled to Austria, Prague, and Hungary together, and they traveled to Italy and Barcelona together, Spain and Italy together. So I think the Scandinavian strategy of traveling and attracting more travelers to this region is the perfect way to go forward. Some of these strategies need to be, when you're looking at the Indian market, you need to actually have a great value proposition to the Indians because they understand that. By value proposition, I don't mean they're looking at cheap products. Even an Apple product, for example, is consumed a lot in India, and that means that we understand quality, but it needs to be packaged really well. We need to have a degree of adaptation and customization for our strategies, because from north to south to east to west, you need a different strategy. People in north travel more as individuals, whereas people in west travel more in groups. Our strategies need to be inspirational and aspiring, and of course, that's what makes it a winning strategy. And very important in the last, we need to be persistent, because I remember some of the partners that came in were quite expecting business to arrive like within 6 months. That may not happen, but I think if we persuade ourselves, if we be there in the business, I'm pretty sure India won't disappoint you. What next? We need more Swedish partners than India. I think more partners would mean that more Indians are going to get interested and impacted. We need to create this knowledge pool through newsletters, through sharing of knowledge, which we already have the infrastructure back in India over the years that we've created, where we already know who's selling Scandinavia, and we can share that information with you. And we need to continuously be in touch with the partners, and I think this relationship needs to be fostering forward. And more Indians, hopefully in Sweden, that experience the Swedish lifestyle and hospitality and go back and certainly talk about their experience back in Sweden. So my question to you is, then, are you ready to welcome more Indians? And my answer is that the Indians are actually ready and absolutely ready to come in big numbers in the future. Namaste and tak. Thank you very much.
Thank you.